Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege, it's a great honor to stand here today and to talk a little bit about my own experience within this program and the importance of such a program. I think that it's an example of outstanding university solidarity as well, because the Research at Risk program within Cara auspices infused, or at least enhanced, a lot of small initiatives, a lot of individual willingnesses to help when people just didn't know how. And you have suggested how to do that across the borders, across the languages, and across the generations. I think never the world needed more solidarity than now, and we actually have this. And I will tell a story of mine, or at least how I understand this. When I started to look into the history or prehistory of the Blitz, I suddenly came across this very important story about the poster Keep Calm and Carry On. It has been produced a couple of months before the Blitz itself. It was printed, it was designed, approved and printed in many million copies, but actually never went into the full circulation, because a couple of weeks before the Blitz, there was a feeling in the air, if we go forward with this poster, people would just panic. And when it was into a couple of weeks after the Blitz, it was too late to come up with such a poster. So the whole print was somehow stuck in many places. One of them was one of the London bookseller, which discovered the deposits of this poster at the brink of the millennium. And then the poster got its second life, and it started to be memed many times, and we all know the memes which go around based on this poster. But in my humble opinion, keep calm and carry on could be a second slogan for Cara in many ways. So when everything just started to happen to me and my country on this big scale of catastrophe on February 24, 2022, a friend of mine, an important writer and documentary recorder, Victoria Amelina, was about to travel back with her child from Egypt via Prague to Ukraine. Their flight was scheduled for the night between February 23 and February 24. And when she was staying in Cairo at the airport by the counter, she was told, "Mom, the airlines are not allowed to fly to your country. We even don't know for sure whether your country will still exist at the moment when your plane is scheduled to land in Kiev." And I think everybody would shake on the idea that you have to heard such a phrase when you are waiting just to come back home after the vacation. So Victoria said to me and then to many other friends, and then she wrote about that experience, and she said that the most important, crucial moment in her life was this couple of minutes, probably quarter of an hour, when she and her child were waiting what will be the decision on behalf of other countries in the world, what will be done to them. And actually all the countries which had some border with Ukraine, except Belarus and Russia, actually opened their borders and opened their homes and opened their hearts to the refugees from Ukraine. And because of that, I want also to address this important punch about the direct flight. Direct flight could be meant in two possible dimensions. One, it's a flight as a refuge, but another one, it's a flight as an air travel. I come from the city of Lviv, Lvov, Lemberg, which had a very windy history of 20th century and very interrupted history. Some big minds were educated in that city, and as a cultural historian and a historian of an intangible heritage, I was writing and thinking and discovering many stories from 1920s and 1930s in my own city, which were not inherited in a proper way because the social texture of the city was almost entirely destroyed by 1945. And when I looked into the history, I understood there was a very important philosophical and mathematical school, which was later called Lviv or Lvov Warsaw School of Thought, which gathered in a particular cafe, which was called Scottish Cafe by some reason, and they were gathering there and discussing all kinds of problems, and they came up with a range of ideas which were then transplanted into other capitals of the thought around the world, and they came into prominence. Some of them participated in Manhattan Project later. And when one of the students of microbiology in the city of Lviv in the late 1920s and 1930s was observing that group of people and their discussions and their non-exactly university-placed work of thought, work of mind, he called them to be thought collective. And he insisted in his book, which was printed exactly in 1933, the year when Cara was established and so many nasty things started to happen in Europe. His name was Ludwig Fleck. He, by the way, was one of the co-authors of the typhus vaccine. But before that, he produced a book on the philosophy of scientific fact. The book was entitled The Origin and Verification of the Scientific Fact. And in that particular book, which was read diligently later by Thomas Kuhn and was acknowledged in his introduction to the paradigm shift, Ludwig Fleck said that every big scientific idea actually takes off the ground within a thought collective. It's not individual, it's not a tandem, it's always more than that. You need a couple of competing schools of thoughts. You have to have a couple of groups of people which actually can discuss and quarrel, and later probably they will come up with something which is really important. And because of that, I would say that other two important people in the domain of the law studies were another thought collective educated in Lviv University in the 1920s. One was Gersh Lauterpacht, refugee to Great Britain during the Second World War. Another one was Raphael Lemkin, refugee to the United States during the Second World War. They both were thinking how to define, how to shift the paradigm within the juridical studies, within the law schools, because of the things which were happening in Europe during 1939-1944. And they came up with two competing ideas. Raphael Lemkin came up with the idea of genocide. Let's call that genocide. What's happening to Jews, what's happening to Roma, what has happened to Armenians 35 years prior, or what has happened to Ukrainians within what we now call Holodomor. Another intellectual, which was Hersch Lauterpacht, here on the British ground, came with the idea of crime against humanity. Both ideas are still vital, and both ideas are useful, and both ideas are applicable to the things which are happening on and on. I think that important notion I got from my grandfather in my city of Lviv was, live long enough, child, and you see it all. I never knew how much I will see up to my almost 50 years, but it's true that Cara lived a decent life of 90 years and saw it all already. And just to finish my small speech, I want to say about the future. For myself, I make a distinction, a difference between global and planetary. I think global is about interconnectedness of human beings, but planetary is what we humans do to the S. So global crisis in these terms prefigure planetary crisis. The less spoken aspect of the Russian war against my country, against Ukraine, is that it undermines our common capacity to deal with the planetary crisis. The big war threatens that altogether it will be too late. And I think it's important that programs like Cara help to make this very important intellectual and social shift from too late to no, it's not too late. Let's try to do what we still can do, and probably it will be timely. So the answer is a gift economy, the answer is thinking of care, and the answer is solidarity. Keep calm and carry on.